One is be an introduction. These did not get cleaned. One will be an introduction. There we go. And then we will come back or have some time together on another day to really get in some deep discussion. And part of this is for me to get to know you and you to get to know me a little bit better. I know that I've been here before, but it's different. Right? It's different to be a resident and then now the senior pastor. I had a church member from Emerywood text me this week, and she said, "Do you just hate me? I haven't heard back from you." And I said, "I'm sorry. It's just a little different. From 7 staff members to 55 and 200 in worship to whoever want to come, right? So it's a little different, but we finally got to talk a bit. So this time is for us to get to know each other. And the thing that I ask of you, I need you to be honest. I need to know what it is that makes Wilshire, and that you love it, and that's the reason why you've been here for months or even decades. But I also need to know what it is that you feel we could do better on, or maybe that we could focus a little more attention on. Because we, as a staff, as a church, we can't move forward in doing that unless we know, right? Unless we have that communication. So my promise to you is I don't get defensive, I don't get angry, I'm not going to cut you off and tell you, well, so what, that's not how we're going to do it. I joke about how anytime I see my grandma, she slips me $100 bill in my hand and she says, "Don't tell anybody about it." So if you all
are supposed to tell us that.
I know. You're not going to see Mayola, so it's fine. But what I often say is if you need to put a note in my hand and say, "Don't tell anybody about it," it's between us, right? Because that's how we grow. That's how we learn and be church together. The other thing that I ask of every new member at Emerywood and continue to have here, I only have one request if you join the church. I need you to be you. I don't need you to be somebody that you think Wilshire wants. I don't need you to be some imposter. I don't need you to come in trying to do all the things that you don't enjoy or want to be a part of. I need you to be you. And if that means that you get mad one day for my sermon and you want to kick my door down, that's fine as long as I can do the same back, right? But I need you to be who you are because we are better as the community of God, as having the Imago Dei in our midst when we are each who we are. So that's my only ask of you as already members, to continue to be who. All right, so while I'm here, this time is open. If you have any questions, if you have concerns that you want to share, if you have joys that you want to talk about, this time is for you. And then in the coming months, we're going to get another time together.
How's the transition been for you and Valerie?
It's been hard. I'm not, and that's only, we picked up in 2.5 weeks, right? And left. And still all our stuff is in North Carolina in storage, right? We sold our house. We had 2 showings, and within 2 days we had 2 offers, and that was it. So the house that had been renovated twice because a hurricane blew 2 60-foot trees through it. All of the things of memories that that you didn't realize that. When we got married, there was no floor in the house, and we were sleeping on an air mattress trying to figure out what to do. Those we didn't get to really grieve that. And so I think now we've finally gotten to catch our breath and say, okay, we're in a different place, a different space, and that's good. But we didn't get that time emotionally, and so I think right now we're there finally. But we have been just so grateful to Wilshire for giving us a little space and a little time, and getting to stay in the resident house as we find a house, as we do the things, and just to adjust, right? So my word of the year has been managing. We're managing it through.
And you have a house now?
We did. We closed last week, which is exciting. It's great, but we have 2 to 3 months of renovation because it's a full gut. So that's fun. we went over yesterday and we were thinking, you know, all the things that we would spend money on, like the exciting parts of what the floor would look like and what the bathrooms, and then they were like, it's gonna be this amount of money to redo the entire electric, and you guess what? All of your sewer lines are messed up too, and I'm like, oh, that's fun.
Wow.
Those aren't the fun parts.
It is right, yeah. That marble floor is now ceramic. But it has been really nice. One of the things is we have learned a lot. You cannot buy a conventional home, a home without a kitchen with a conventional loan, so we had to go find a specialty bank that would allow us to do it and to go through and then do the construction. The good part of that is my ex-brother-in-law is a contractor here in Dallas that does high rises and things, and so he's doing it all.
Oh, wow.
I made sure to get permission from my sister before hiring
I was
him.
gonna say, not too ex.
That's right, I said, can we do this? She was like, oh, it's fine, he just did my house. And I was like, okay, all right, we're good to go. So that's been really nice, and they've just moved so quick within a week of really, it's in Munger, so very historic, over 100 years old, so that's where all the work
Yeah.
needed to be done. There wasn't a kitchen, there wasn't really any bathrooms, they were all just torn out, and so, joy.
Just breathe.
That's right, that's right. Like, every time we go in, we're like, oh my goodness, there's pipes, and people are like, that's what you get excited about? I'm like, yes, that's what we're excited about. We can use a toilet now.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
You and Valerie appear, at least to me, to be very different personalities, okay?
You're right.
How do we as a congregation make room for both of you and accommodate both of you and make you both feel equally welcome and that kind of thing? What are your different needs, in other words?
That's, yeah. So Valerie is a huge introvert. One-on-one, you may not notice that because she'll talk with you at one-on-one, but she's not going to do this, like stand in a room. That is not her thing, which is funny because her first degree is in operetta singing. So she's used to being in front of crowds, but if you were to talk, no. One of the things that I love about Valerie in her introvertness is helping me to remember that not everybody's extroverted. And so not everybody just wants me to go in a room and just say, hey, how are you? She's like, when we go into people's house, she sits in the car and she's like, I need you to be calm. That's what I can do that. But the thing you may notice, many people will say, I haven't seen Valerie. I'm like, she comes to church more than I do. But she sits in a different spot every week, and that's her way of getting to know the congregation. And so if you don't see her out front of things, if you don't see her on a bunch, it is that her type of getting to know is sitting in the pews. You'll see her holding babies while she's sitting in the pews or coloring with kids. And that's one of our biggest difference, I think, for Wilshire and Emerywood. Please hear me, I'm not doing this right now. Please don't get, the first thing I did at Emory was took the chairs off the chancel. We did not have, no one sat on the chancel. It was all equal, we all sat in the congregation. And so for me, what I love was that one Sunday I'm holding Burton, the little boy that is, 9 months old, and we're singing hymns and everything, and I pass him off to his mom before I go up to preach, or I'm sitting with someone else and we're trying to figure out the notes because we both can't sing it good enough. It was being in that space. So this is one of us, in a larger space. Valerie's like, okay, am I going to sit in the balcony today, or am I going to sit on the organ side, or the piano side? So all that's to say, having grace as we get to know each other, because we're going to do it in a very different way. Sometimes Valerie will come with me to big things, but Valerie's also an attorney. So when you have to get 1,900 billable hours, she may not be at everything, right? It's a very different model of, that yes, I'm here for a lot of stuff. But she may not be able to because of her own career as well. And so understanding that's a new model. The best way is being able to let us love you all in our way. I think that's the best way you can allow us to have space. And the beautiful part of that is we love this, right? And so we do love getting to know people. and hosting in our home when we have plumbing and floors. We often do that, we kind of did an every other week thing with getting different members together that never met in the church, and we would just have dinner, and it would just be a great time. And so as we are navigating how best to do that, here, we're also navigating how best to do that in our marriage in a very different way from Emory Woods, very different from Wilshire, and so learning that structure. So I would say the best way you allow us to have space is letting us, or loving us and walking with us, is letting us get some time to figure it out. Because it's going to take some time, right? It's just it's different. And that's not to say it's bad, it's different. And let's be honest, many of you all who are married have been married for years and years. We're just in our 4th year. And 5 months after we got married, a pandemic happened, and all the things that you're supposed to learn in the 5 and 10 year route, we learned in the 1st year route. I was thinking, oh my God, are we gonna make it? I don't think we can sit in this house together for a pandemic. And we learned we could not. So I went to work every day, even though it was a shutdown. And her office was in the house, and it worked out great. But you're right, we are very, very different. But I think one of the qualities is that Val really helps me. I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, if that means anything to anybody. And so 3s are what the story we need to be told. We're often told we are loved because of what we do and how good we do things, and not loved for who we are. And so every morning she wakes up to remind me, you're loved for who you are and not what you do. And so, yeah, that was a long ramble.
No.
How did you
Please tell me.
Dale.
Say,
Dale. I'm Robert Combs. Do you remember him?
oh yeah,
He just passed. He's
yes,
95.
you did,
Yeah.
yes.
National treasure.
Yes.
I was just wondering, how did you and Valerie meet?
Yeah, mutual friends, and a big part of Wilshire too. So I was preaching at a youth conference while I was a resident here, just kind of flew to North Carolina, and a friend said, I don't understand why you're not dating anyone. And I said, no one wants to date a pastor. Like, I wouldn't want to date a pastor. Sounds awful. And Valerie, who did modeled in order to pay for school, college, she was on this kind of modeling thing that was part of the conference, and I said, if someone like that, so beautiful, amazing, maybe, just to get them off my back, because I knew Lindsay was not gonna, and Lindsay said, oh, I'm actually gonna go see her in 2 weeks. And I was like, dadgummit. So Lindsay went and talked to Valerie, and Valerie said, I'm good, I actually don't want to date anybody. And we're like, okay, there it is. A month after that, our kiddos went to preteen camp. Mular went up to Valerie and said, you really should meet this guy that's our resident. He's a minister at our church, and it was my name, and Valerie was like, oh, I heard of him before. And then Julie brought in cookies and said, these are from Timothy to the staff. And so Valerie messaged me from whatever the friend gave and just said, thanks for the cookies. I met Mular, who said so many great things about you. And I said, oh, that's so sweet, thank you. And then I was speaking at a conference in Atlanta while Valerie was in seminary there. And I messaged her and I just said, hey, would you like to go grab dinner? And she said, sure. Well, what it looked like was that I was eating and she drank water the entire time. And if you notice Valerie looks, if she's just sitting there, she looks angry a lot of times. She's really not. She's happy as can be. It's just a face. I was like, this is not good. And I was like, okay, if you give me one date, and if it doesn't work, that's fine. I'll fly back to Dallas and we'll be good. And we ended up having a 6-hour date of finding the best donut place in Atlanta. And we still have our score and our rating for that. That's in like our little booklet, but we did long distance from there. She didn't finish at seminary. She realized that's not what she wanted to do, and I was like, yes. Marrying a minister does not sound fun. And so she went to Vanderbilt, did her master's in community development, and then finished law school in North Carolina at Elon. So she does transactional law, contracts law, what I think is the most boring thing ever. She came home after class one day and she was like, I found it. I finally found what I love. And I was like, all right, it's gonna be civil rights, it's immigration. And she's like, contracts. And I was like, okay. So I'm not retiring early? But she just truly loves that. That's how we met.
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing.
So we were long distance our entire dating time until we got married, and then
Wow.
so it was a
That's why the pandemic was so hard.
right. Exactly. We often, I do when I do premarital counseling, I tell them, there's going to be some differences that it's going to be something so small that sets you off, and you just got to come back together and say it's okay. I say all these things in premarital counseling, and then I'm like, oh, I got to do it myself. But I realized the thing that set us off as we were moving in our space, we've been there maybe 3 or 4 weeks, is that I put the peanut butter in the refrigerator and she puts the peanut butter in the pantry. And for some reason, that was the straw that just lost it all. And so we learned that there is 2 peanut butters, one in the fridge and one in the pantry. It works.
Timothy,
Yeah.
we loved you as a resident, and we were thrilled when you came to preach in Little McCall. But I would be curious to know what tipped the scale for you to come back to Welsh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think some of you all have heard me say before this, if you were at the Wednesday night thing, so sorry if I'm repeating. I didn't really plan on this. No one. I didn't. I saw that George had retired, and I thought, that's nice. I'm happy. And so a couple of people messaged and said, I think you should do this. And I thought, no, I'm all right. With Emerywood, we moved from a staff to 2 to 7. When I got there, worship was at 83, and we were moving to a worship that was 233 on the average. So things felt right and good. We were in this space and, didn't feel like it was time to just jump ship, right, just to go. And Valerie and I talked, and one of the things was, Valerie said, now if I have to retake the bar, don't even apply, because I'm not, that was the worst thing ever. And I was like, yes ma'am. And then a day later she texted and said, well, 2 months ago, Texas adopted the universal bar, so my score transfer is over, so are we applying? I said, okay, well, let's do some prayer and some discussion about this. And really the tipping factor was a conversation with one of my dear mentors. And he said, he had thought that I should apply, and I said, no, I don't know, Steve, I think I'm okay. And he said, I have a question for you. I said, okay. He said, if someone else gets the job, and they go to Wilshire, and they love those people differently than you would love them, would you be pissed about it? And I said, yeah, I would be angry, because those people help me become who I am. I love those people, and if they neglect them, if they hurt them, or if they do not walk in the same way that I would, then I would be mad as hell. And Steve said, I think you have your answer. And so I did apply, obviously, and the whole time I thought, you know what, this isn't happening, it's fine, we're gonna keep going, keep on living life. And even when Katie called me, I kind of said, oh, thanks Katie, I know this has been great, we're down to 2. I trust what y'all are doing. And she said, what are you talking about? I'm calling to ask you if you want to be our pastor. And I was like, oh, okay. Wasn't expecting that. And so another big difference for me and Valerie, this is the most question, or most time I've talked about me and Valerie in the room. Kate Bowler has a podcast, which is phenomenal. If you don't hear it, I try to listen to it every week. But we listen to it sometimes together. And there was one where they said that this woman said, I walk through life without expectations. Because then I'm not getting disappointed. I'm not going to expect that this happened or this happened. And Valerie said, oh my goodness, how could anybody live like that? And I was like, we've been married for 3 years and known each other for 5. How do you not know that's me? And so I am a big person of And that a lot of that's my growing up and all that. It's just, we don't have expectations. We're not gonna, because that makes the heartache worse. And I think, I think Anna would say too, in some of these pieces, there is some awkward vulnerability in that. When you're sitting in a room who all knows you, and you have to get really, really vulnerable to a point where they may know you and still dismiss you, right? And not dismiss in a bad way, but that it just doesn't work. And so there were those moments. But I think the honesty and the transparency of the committee as we kept moving forward made me feel, okay, I can do it. Well, I can start believing I can do it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Diane.
You got a question?
So this is
Okay.
maybe too personal a question, so if it is, you can say, no, I'd rather not answer.
All right.
And actually, something I never asked George, so now I'm like, oh, I should. Sundays work for you.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how do you find Sabbath, and maybe how can we help you find Sabbath?
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember who I was with last week. We talked a little bit, not about this, but the way that walking in on Sunday mornings into worship, that it takes me the first 5 minutes to calm my body and say, this isn't the time to write down everything that went wrong, what's going on in the mic here, or that I have to remind myself that this is worship too, even though it is also work, right? So that's one way I have to remind myself we're moving into this. Sabbath though, so my favorite theologian, who is probably included in every sermon, you just, without being named, is Abraham Joshua Heschel. If you've not read his book on Sabbath, you should. It is 80 pages. It's great. So Sabbath for me, Friday and Saturday, but let's be honest, that's not always realistic, right? If there's a funeral, if there's something going on, we make that time for it. And so I have to be very intentional regarding that. And so what I do love is I try to put my phone off on Fridays. And Debbie knows how to get to me if there's an emergency that I need to be a part of, but try to turn that off. And so this will change soon, but Valerie and I have always had Friday. That was always her off day too. And so we got to wake up and do breakfast and then move, and that was kind of a start of that. I love fishing. And so finding a nice catfish hole, and also, that there's no cell service, so I can't do anything about that. I have not got to do that yet. So I know that it's coming, and I have to start taking some time off. I have to actually take my Sabbath days. And so a big part of that for me is I have to start being aware about that. And most of the time, I usually set good boundaries. And it's not the congregation that oversteps on those boundaries, it's myself. Like Friday, I walked in to grab something and Debbie said, "Why are you here?" And I was like, "I needed this." And she's like, "You didn't need that." And I was like, "Yes, ma'am." So yeah, I find Sabbath really in one is just really turning this off. Because one of the things that I am very intentional about, and you may know, I have no problem with the entire congregation having my phone. Now, if you need to contact me, if you need to email me, if you need that, I am okay with that. I don't trust, I'm a horrible texter back or phone caller back, so that's all on you.
So you know.
But that's right, just so you know. But I find that is, if we are going to be in community together and journeying together, we got to know each other in the same way we would our normal friendships, right? And so for me, turning that off and sitting in the midst of the world is good for me, even as painful as the world can be. And my last kind of piece I add to that is that, the way that I write my sermons are also Sabbath for me. And Emerywood, I can't write in my office. That's just unless it's out of necessity and I have to get it done. So at Emerywood, I went to a soul food restaurant that I would go every Thursday. And it was owned by two sisters, Becky and Mary, who have been there and been part of the civil rights and at Woolworths and all of this, and so it's just the place where everybody knew to come get good food, and it's beat down place, and I would go there every week and start my sermon. And Miss Becky, who was going through Alzheimer's, would come, every time she saw me, she knew that I was pastor at the white church. That's how she named me. And she'd say, all right, pastor, what we preaching on this Sunday so I don't have to go to church. And so she would sit there with me. But what happened was that many people in the community would come and sit in the booth with me and tell me stories. And so most of my sermon illustrations came from them. Right, that was what I loved because it was part of the community. But also it helped me get to know that certain people that were city council people in my congregation that would never go on that side of town, I could come and introduce them and say, hey, do you know what's going on over here? And that became Sabbath for me because I love stories. So it was like sitting with a day of storytelling while also still, writing, but I need and getting that going on. And so for me, I think my Sabbath is sporadic, right? It's not just on those Fridays and Saturdays, but getting the other day, getting to just sit down with two of the kids and get ice cream. And like, I know people are like, that's work, and you gotta sign it off, but it was Sabbath, right? Yeah. Deborah.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good morning. I don't know if anybody's brought this up yet, but I noticed at the end, when you're doing benediction, you always ask somebody to walk down with you. So is that something new for you? And I love it. And how you just pick somebody at random?
Yeah, it really is. When I'm walking down, I just grab somebody. They don't know it. I don't know it. We just grabbing somebody because we got to make it. So that benediction I actually wrote before I was a resident or becoming, and actually a big piece of today's sermon with Ezekiel and the dry bones and breathing life. Ministry is all about community and relationship for me. And if the Gospels are all about where Jesus was and what Jesus did while Jesus was there. Right? There are only 2 sermons in the Gospels that Jesus ever preached. And I think sermons are great. But sermons, in my mind, are not what's always going to change people's heart and mind. It is being relational and being in life and sitting with them in those moments. And so for me, that benediction is all of us collectively taking a deep breath to go out into the world, right? It's collectively grabbing someone in the community that we know or that we may not even know, and saying, I need to get to know that breath of life, so that my own can be better, right? And when we are communally breathing in and out together, we are communally becoming different and diverse because each of us breathes differently. Each of us has a different breath of life within us. And so that benediction for me is another way of presence and community and relationship building in that. All right, I'm so sorry, y'all. Thank y'all for this time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I mean it, I will say this over and over again until you believe it, and I'm going to keep telling you when you do believe it. I love you.
We love
When we have a spring fishing party our class goes to, you can see the picture on the back of the wall.
Oh!
You and Valerie are invited.
You're competition, I'm winning. No.
Okay.
You have to meet
Jim,
All right.
come on up. I grabbed your name tag. Let me go through quickly this. The Road to Resurrection is coming up April the 2nd, next Sunday. Sign up for the Ramadan dinner. This is going to be quick while Jim gets ready. Food service is changing. You'll see that on page 10. Darren DeMint is a guest for the April 5th Lunch and Learn. Adventurers are having an author featured. Order your Easter lilies. Wednesday Night Live on page 11. Seen, Known, and Loved is, our Lenten theme is on page 12. Pray Away film screening is on page 13. And Matt Cook is our I Am Wilshire for this week on that one. And if many of you know that this Gary and Linda Cook were members here until he's now at Gaston, whatever the church is that's on down the street here. Anyway, that's his son, and that's kind of a quick wrap. But we'll pick it up from there. You're up until 10:40, so.
Oh, sure.
Good morning, Jim. How are you?
Good morning. You'll have to talk really fast this morning.
Yes.
Well, I know you're gonna have to talk.
We may be in trouble.
Oh, boy. Well, no, I would just as soon listen to the pastor,
Really?
instead of taking up your time, let him. Isn't he wonderful?
Yes,
I
amazing.
love our pastor, and I think God has blessed us beyond our imagination.
He was a cool resident too, by the way.
I'm sorry.
He was a cool resident.
Oh, he
Yeah,
was.
yeah. He was-
We knew him
He was
in
one of
that
my
way.
favorites.
And, oh my, the Lord is good and wonderful in many ways. Our lesson today is entitled Unexpected Outcomes. And if you have read any of the scriptures involved, you know what that unexpected outcome is. Would anyone dare to make a guess?
The resurrection of Christ.
It sure is. And it was unexpected. Let me tell you why. Someone read in this little preface that I prepared, John 2:18 through 22. It has nothing to do with the scriptures assigned to us, but still, I think it has information that we indeed need. John 2:18 to 22. Someone read that for us, please.
The Jews then said to him, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews then said, "This temple has been under construction for 46 years, and you will raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking of the temple of his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word that Jesus had spoken.
Read 22 again.
After he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word that Jesus had spoken.
What does that tell you about those times throughout his ministry of approximately 3 years with them, the disciples? What does this tell you about their relationship? The disciples and Jesus.
Even as close as they were to him, they still couldn't quite accept,
They didn't get it,
yeah,
you know.
just too much.
Using modern day parlance, they just didn't get it. Would you have perfectly understood him when he would give a hint like this?
No chance.
No chance. I mean, there are people today that say that is baloney. And those people have lost it. They believe this. Among other things in this book. But it's important for us to nail this down because it was unexpected. Easter morning. They weren't even thinking about it. They'd forgotten it, it says. Forgotten all about something he said. So, yes. Now there are records of this in the Gospels. And each one, and they're each different. They're not the same, and I've prepared the sheet for you, just rambling notes that I have made, and you couldn't read, so I tried to put it in print for you. You could not read my writing if you tried real hard. I can't even read it. Well, in Matthew, we have Mary Magdalene and Mary approaching the tomb. And notice that the first two people to arrive on the scene were females, women. And I think that is noteworthy. And an angel rolls a stone back in their presence.
Was he a male or female?
Now, that's a question I can't answer. Good question, though. I mean, it's very possible they were females, but they were strong.
Yeah, like the roller stone.
Because if you have some idea about that stone that rolled away at their effort, hey, that it was two angels that rolled away the stone. That's recorded here. And he spoke to them and told them to look into the tomb. It was empty. And they were told by the angels that he had been raised. And then he instructed them to go and tell the disciples. And in Matthew's account, they met the Lord on their way to the disciples to tell them. And he told them, go tell the disciples that he would meet them in Galilee, sort of a postscript, angelic postscript. Now then, Mark, 13 verses there, and the first persons to reach the tomb that morning, that Easter morning, the first Easter, was Mary Magdalene, and she was mentioned by Matthew. And then there was Mary, the mother of James. Now the other Mary, who do you think she was?
Was she Jesus' mother?
Could be. The other Mary.
Guess is any.
I don't know for sure. And but there's a lot of speculation, and it could be. But in Mark it says she, Mary, the mother of James, as opposed to the other Mary in Matthew, and then Salome. Now, does anybody know who Salome is? I've read it somewhere, but I've forgotten. But she was somehow a kinsperson to Mary, the mother of Jesus. Maybe a cousin, I'm not sure. You better look that up, don't take it from me. They came to the tomb, those three, to anoint his body. And the stone had already been rolled away. And they entered the tomb, and there was a young guy. And he was dressed in a white robe. And, well, they're like I would be, scared out of my wits. And so, he told them, no, just calm down. And he told them to go tell the disciples, and that they would find him in Galilee. Now, I don't know where in Galilee, because there's several places in Galilee he could have been. There could have been, maybe he was in Tiberias, maybe he was in Capernaum. That was headquarters. Probably that's where it was. But anyway, they did this with terror and amazement. Then there's Luke. He chimes in, and this is in the 24th chapter of Luke. And suddenly, here you have two men in dazzling clothes and telling the ladies. The men didn't even show up. But here were the ladies, and it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and there's a lot of speculation as to who Joanna was, and who she might have been kin to, or her association with apparently a whole group of women who were followers of the Lord. And then Mary, the mother of James, now, of course, she was present in Mark's gospel, and then still other women. Women, 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 women.
The original WMU. You know?
What'd you say?
The original WMU. I mean,
It
we
was
were
the first WMU, absolutely.
We were,
How did you know that?
my mom was one of the first deacons to be ordained, and, you know, when they started ordaining.
Okay,
And it was, yeah. So,
I love that,
she was
yes.
very, at South Main Baptist, we were at South Main Baptist. and she
Okay.
said another was ordained.
Hey, that's great.
So
Well-
Jim, can I ask you a question? Does it sound like the 3 women went to embalm, but the other ladies were maybe waiting outside the tomb?
That's a possibility.
Because that was their job. I mean, that's what
Uh-huh.
that was custom, right? Customary
Yeah,
that they did.
yeah. But isn't it interesting that it's women?
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, gosh.
they went and told the 11. And the men thought it was a what?
I don't tell.
I don't tell.
Well, they were crazy.
They could, yeah, you're crazy. You're hallucinating, you're, okay. Peter, however, runs to the tomb. And also, apparently, John ran with him. It was a marathon. And they were in a race, and John is quicker than Peter. He beat John to the tomb. And it's interesting, though, backing up to Luke, how Peter found the linen clothes, and they were placed by themselves. Then in John, Mary Magdalene is the only lady that was mentioned, and she was the first to. So you've got 4 different accounts, but in each instance, they are women. In John, the stone was already removed, and so she reports to Peter, and she tells him they've taken the Lord away. Now, who's they?
Probably thought the Sanhedrins.
Could have been Jewish, or it could have been Roman. Because I think we also pick up in the gospel narrative somewhere that, who was it, Pilate or Herod? They were concerned that the disciples would get his body and make up a story, you know, about his miraculous, yeah. Well, the stone had already been removed, and she runs back and tells them, and then, of course, Peter and John race to the tomb, and then at this point in John, verse 11, I noticed that Mary enters the scene. And she saw 2 angels in the tomb, and then she saw Jesus, and she didn't recognize him. She worshiped him when she realized that he was not a gardener, but he was the Lord, and she worshiped him, and he said, "Don't touch me." Why do you think he said that? Remember, all of this is so unexpected. They
That
weren't
always
prepared.
puzzled me because Thomas doubted, and he said, put your finger on my, yes, on my side,
Yes.
you know,
Uh-huh.
and my hands. And so I've always wondered why he said that. So can't wait for the answer.
Well, you're gonna be waiting quite a while.
I wonder if
Oh.
was there something culturally between women and men that, you know, for a woman to initiate a touch was taboo, and him being in that resurrected body and saying that maybe emphasized the reality of,
Gosh,
That-
that is a.
I don't know.
A thought, a good thought.
I don't know what the rules are.
There may be a cultural thing involved in don't touch me. I don't know.
But he said, because I've not yet ascended.
Yes.
So I thought, you know, it really had to do with that.
So it had more of
But
a,
yet, like, I thought that too, Dennis, when I read that, I thought, you know, it's funny, every year you read this, and then you have new
Something
thoughts.
different.
yeah,
Yeah.
I guess it'll always
But
be
even-
that way as long as we live.
Yeah.
We'll
Hopefully.
wonder about these things, but that's a good thought. And then, of course, he's sort of prophetic, in saying, don't touch me. He says, until I.
Ascended.
Wow.
George preached a sermon one time, and I've forgotten how he said it, because I get a lot now, but he said that Jesus was saying, I've got work to do, I've got to, he wanted to emphasize that it wasn't, don't hold me too tight. Which was interesting, because I had
Yeah,
a little
it is.
accident at the receiving the Lord's Supper on
Mhm.
Thursday night,
Right.
and it was intentional. You go down to the front, and I picked up the little glass, and it went, boop, it spilled. Now, I'm not Catholic, and I'm not, you know, and neither am I superstitious, but it set me back.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
because I had just spilled them and everything, and I thought, well, maybe I'll hear something on that. And but George says, don't cling to me. I've got to be about. We've got to go out, and don't hold me too tight. I think is what George.
Interesting.
And
I
the
didn't know
little
that.
glasses used to be glass, and if you squeeze that plastic one, it goes.
Wow.
And it kind of, you know,
How
set me back a little
interesting.
bit, even though, like I say, I'm not,
Uh-huh.
I don't have a Catholic view of the, but
Right.
still I take it seriously.
Yes,
And,
well, that's fascinating.
But George never sees anything that he doesn't,
That he doesn't have an answer for.
well, an answer or a comment on, you know, that doesn't mean something
Right.
to him a little
Uh-huh.
deeper than
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
other thing.
Hey, thank you for sharing that. That's interesting.
Mhm.
Well, and you're not a Roman Catholic. I sort of knew that to start with. But I'm not demeaning Roman Catholics. They're dear friends. They're good people. I don't believe what they believe, but I accept them as my friends in Christ. And so, anyway, anybody, well, then on the second page that you have, the 12 were behind the locked doors. And this is when someone pointed out that, I believe it is, when Jesus said to Thomas, hey, put your finger in this wound. And he told them what we say to one another when we take the Lord's Supper here in Wilshire, peace be unto you. A kind of passing of the peace, and I like that. And he showed them his hands and his side, and then the thing though that I would like for us to nail down is the women. Sorry ladies, but you are the ones who showed up. You showed up. And that's all here in print for you. What do you make of this in relation to then and now? I have a number of friends, and they condemn a lady preaching the gospel or even being on the rostrum, if you want to call it that, or the stage, or the whatever. I've even had people call it the altar. But I have a grandson, and I love him to death, but he thinks that for women to preach is not biblical. And I've been over it with him, and he hadn't convinced me, and I haven't convinced him. But there are many people who say that women have no place in ministry. Yes, ma'am.
Just, still going on right now in SBC, they're still arguing over that, about the,
Oh,
what is
yeah.
it, 4 large churches have been basically sanctioned or disaffiliated with the SBC because they have women preachers like Saddleback.
Yeah.
So people are still, after all this time,
Still
having
hung
a
up.
difficult time with that. And
People that
look
feel
at
that way
this.
seem to have a limited view of Christianity.
Yes.
Because they
Yeah.
believe they know the mind of God.
Yeah, thanks for that.
And I was hoping that Ann would be considered. In fact, I said so to Bill Drenberg. And he said, well, Jerry, it's a process. So, I mean, the whole thing in calling Timothy was hush-hush, and I don't have any idea what went on, of course. But I would have loved to have had, that's not her last name now, but I would have loved to have had Ann Drenberg back. I think that would have been wonderful.
Well, I've been so amazed, Dennis, that some of the best sermons I've heard were preached by women.
Yes, yes.
And,
We have a book right there. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
yes,
Okay,
sir.
I just Googled, why didn't Jesus let Mary touch her? And one theologian said that Jesus became, after that resurrection, became the ultimate high priest.
Yeah.
And that Mary had just been into a tomb. That would have been made him ceremonially unclean, I can't say the word. And he was about to be in the presence of God, and he didn't want to do anything to defile that. So it was nothing, that was that theologian's concept. But anyway, we'll see. Okay, so let's go through our prayer requests here. Of course, Kay Brashear, Kay sounds like she's getting some stronger.
She is. She's beginning to do things now. And she's still got a lot of visits for scans and, it's a complicated affair. I didn't realize that.
That's wonderful. That is
It's been
wonderful.
really good.
Wonderful.
Of course, I expect that from Elgin.
Yes, yes. And we had great news from Barbara Floyd's post-op this week that she tested negative for cancer, that they are still going to do at least 2 more, maybe 3 more chemos on her, and she will get her strength back after that process is over, so that's wonderful news. We are sad that Ray and Laura Snow have COVID for the second time, and the biggest thing that made them sick was not being able to be here for Timothy, because it was a funny story that Cornelia, Ray's sister, who we're praying for, who's been sick after GI surgery and will have a long recovery, called Ray one weekend and said, "Hey, I hear you're getting a new pastor." And Ray said, "Yeah, we are, and you're not gonna like it." So anyway, that was his sister's church. Okay. All right, from Dale. Okay, so Dale, tell me this story. Laura Hannafin?
She was my best friend in high school, and I just saw in the obits today, I was reading, her husband died unexpectedly in November, and then her dad, who was good friends with my dad, he was 96, a Dallas resident, he died March 4th.
Oh, my.
So,
This was really close together, it sounds like. Is it?
yeah, and then the dads were friends, you know, going to high school, we got in trouble together and stuff like that.
Does she live in town, in Dallas?
She's in Southern California now.
California, okay. Okay. All right, Vicki, tell me about your niece here.
Well, she has Fuchs disease, which is, causes blindness. And so this big doctor, you know, ophthalmologist of some sort, specialist, said that she needed to have this surgery or she would lose her eyes. So she would lose her vision. And so and nobody in our family had this, and it's supposed to be hereditary. But anyway, so she had one surgery, and it got infected about 3 weeks later. And I just told her, I said, don't touch your eyes. You gotta wash your hand every time. But anyway, it got infected. It took months to get that cleared up, and it's very painful. The drops were like antibiotic, and then yada, yada, yada. She had like 3 different drops. Anyway, long story, she had to have that surgery redone on that one eye. And it'll take a year for that to completely heal, and then she's gotta have the other eye done, which is really, it was really hard for her to gear up to do
And
this
now she knows
again.
what she's gonna face.
Yes,
Oh.
and it's awful, but, I mean, the drops are like, we were every 2 hours for like 3 weeks, all night long. I mean, she couldn't sleep, it was horrible.
Where does
But
she live?
She's in Ardmore, Marietta, actually, Oklahoma. She's very precious to me, but I've got
Okay.
a lot of nieces and nephews. She's one of 8.
What is Leanne's last name?
66, Cochran. I was the youngest of 5. They're, you know, so my nieces are almost my age. That's what I tell people. I'm 67.
Okay, and this journey's from you
Don't
about
laugh
Barbara
so loud.
Peterson?
Yes, I hope I spelled that right.
Yeah.
She's had, and I went by the library this morning and talked to one of her regular volunteers, and as far as we know, it's okay. She went in, I think it was Friday, and had
Oh,
this.
I heard from her. Barbara
Oh,
Peterson?
yes.
Yes, it was all clear.
Oh,
No
good.
blockage, no
Oh,
blockage.
wonderful.
What?
Great.
Oh,
Barbara Peterson
Heart-
had a
I
heart
missed
cath.
the beginning.
Heart cath, yeah, I did too.
Good, very good, all right. Anything else? I see your father-in-law, David, is he doing well?
Last time I visited him, he was cheerful, eating a little better.
Good,
They did get him up walking a little bit.
good. And Deborah, Ronnie is doing better, or?
Sort of, and you know, everything seems like it's going up and down here in 7 months of marriage, right? But we had to rush him to the hospital on Friday morning. Yeah, from stomach pains and God knows what else, but he's at home now. I mean, he went to church this morning, his church. But it's just, it's back and forth, you know.
Did you all know they were high school, they
Yeah.
were friends and they graduated together? I'd not
Well, we've known
realized
each
till we
other
talked.
since junior high school.
Wow, that's
Wow.
amazing.
But, yeah,
That's pretty amazing.
yeah,
Pretty
a lot of
amazing.
years, yeah.
And Linda, your biopsy, still thinking about April, or?
Yeah, April 6th, and, but I have some good news from last week. We prayed for Frances Jones, and I saw her, she lives in my street, so I saw her 2 days after her cataract surgery, and she's doing pretty good. Her sister was staying with her, but she talked about how weird that was to be completely in the dark.
She
And
was
she
so
said,
scared.
well, we danced, we held hands and danced, and
Oh.
Frances. So
Such
she's,
a spirit.
so she's doing well, but, you know, she's blind in one eye and then had to have her cataract
Good
thing.
eye.
So she was completely blind for about 48 hours, I guess, so.
She said it was a little blurry. I heard from her yesterday, I think, and she said she's still a little blurry, but that's cataract surgery, you know, it is. It takes a little while to clear up.
Anything else? Let's pray. Thanks for being here today. Appreciate it. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate you. Heavenly Father, we thank you for a time that we can come and read Scripture. And what a great story today. We're thankful for those early women who were brave enough to go to find Jesus' tomb and find he wasn't there. We pray for Kay Brashear. She gained strength. Help her to fight cancer and to be able to withstand the treatments that are given to her. We have a prayer of praise for Barbara Floyd, who tested negative for cancer, and help her to gain strength as she finishes up chemo. We pray for Laura and Ray Snow, who have COVID, and give them a full and speedy recovery. We pray for Dale's friend, Laura Miller, who lost both her husband and her father in a short period of time. Be with her and and give her comfort and support her with friends like Dale. Lord, we pray for Vicky's niece, Leanne Cochran, and help her to, as she goes through this second serious eye surgery last week, with a planned year recovery time, and be with her during those first few months in that arduous regimen of eye drops. And be with her and give her strength and energy to get through that.